Yes, I'm a native Nebraskan. I was born here a long time ago, and have lived here most of the time, except when I was teaching or going to school in other states, which happened quite frequently. But I've come back to Nebraska, and recently have done my teaching and by retiring in Nebraska. And my ancestors are all native Nebraskans too. I was born in a little village in northeast Nebraska named Brunswick. And my ancestors on both sides of the family are Nebraska natives too, but my mother's parents came from Sweden. I think I do write about things that have happened in our family, and about both good and bad things, of course. And I suppose that makes it personal, doesn't it? Well, there's a great deal about that wonderful prairie land and the countrysides, the trees, the wildflowers. Of course, both of my grandparents were on homesteads, and I never lived on the homestead myself, but I was in the country a great deal. So I love the trees, the wildflowers of Nebraska. I love the fields. There's just something great. It must have been something great that took me home to Nebraska after I'd been in so many other places. I think that we're all affected by the things around us. So naturally, I'm going to write about Nebraska, and I'm going to write about Brunswick. I guess it's the hometown. It was close to both of the homesteads on both sides of my family. You know, that's just our home. As one man said to me one time at an alumna banquet there, he says, you're just a Brunswick girl. And I guess that's the whole answer. Well, I was born in a little village in northeast Nebraska called Brunswick. Oh yeah, I got a lady here from Brunswick too, Barbara Fox, who's also born in Brunswick. After I went to school in Brunswick, I went to college, and then I came back and taught in Brunswick too. So I know that schoolhouse pretty well. I wrote a poem about the Brunswick School, and Greg Kuzma put it in a book titled Nebraska Poets. And Vicki just found that on the computer back there. So it's in this room. The poem is called District 75. And I'm going to take it out of the school, read it from the school cookbook where they put it. District 75. When I was in my hometown, one day this summer, I drove past our old red brick schoolhouse. It looked a lot the same, but older, like the rest of us. I guess I've taught in every room in that building except the furnace room. And even there, somebody heard me decry cracking a watermelon on the floor, and I wasn't talking to the furnace. I've also been a pupil in every room, passing the tests and looking longingly out of every window. Sometimes I see myself walking in that front door, getting that old greeting of hiss and sputter from the steam radiators. Then I notice that somebody has rubbed Limburger on the pipes again. P.U. I take the left-hand stairs down to the south basement classroom. I see again the handy ground-level windows, just low enough to show us the legs only of people walking past. I walk back upstairs to the main floor, and I seem to hear my fourth grade teacher sneezing with her winter-long cold. The more she suffered, the more I loved her. My footsteps are loud on the wooden stairs as I climb to the second floor, to the office, to the secret attic. I walk out at the very top and front of the structure, and there, behind a pretty white railing, the big bell hangs. Then I realize I'm not there at all. But if I were, I'd go back down those creaky stairs and pull the bell rope, so the bell could say a few appropriate words. Hello, June. My grandparents on both sides of the family were Nebraska pioneers. They were homesteaders. My Swedish grandparents were married in Sweden and then came to this country. I wrote a poem about my Swedish grandmother and won something in Chaparral. That was when Gertrude Auld and I were in the will classes at Wesleyan. Someone wrote for the Wesleyan newspaper and put my poem in one issue of that paper. Doris D. Roberts knew about that poem too and told me to send it to the Lincoln-Lancaster County Commission on the Status of Women because they were publishing a book about the granddaughters. So here's my poem about my Swedish grandmother. And there are a couple of Swedish phrases in it, which some of you may know anyway. Svenska flicka, as a Swedish girl, and lilla du, which means little you. So here is Johanna Bernadina. My Swedish grandmother is gone now. She was an immigrant to the United States in the 1880s. And when I was born, her first grandchild, she smoothed my crumpled ears for a long time, my mother told me, because she thought a svenska flicka should have pretty ears. Part of me came in her across the sea. Sometimes I dream her wedding day in Sweden. I see young nieces gathering wildflowers to wreathe the wedding dinner plates. I hear sweet Swedish love words, lilla du, and I am afraid to board the ship. This poem came from a dream that I had about a big house built up high on the rocks on a seashore, and it's called Your House. I love to drive to your house around the stark, sharp curves of a winding, climbing road. I persevere and catch my breath a few times before a hilltop where a wide doorway welcomes me. Inside, I'm never sure which door leads to the den, the kitchen, or the fireplace room. Your house is built on rock, I know, but could there be a jutting part with cantilevered room? Could I open a door somewhere and get the sea mist in my face with nothing but drop away below? The next poem I want to read is by a dog, and it's called A Dog Has Such a Refreshing Point of View. That neighbor woman glares at me whenever I go by. If looks could kill, I know that I'd be mighty sure to die. She has the softest, greenest lawn. She has that female cocker, Fawn, who has 5 puppies. You can see they're short-haired, shiny black like me. I'd love to run into that lawn instead of walking by, but that old Hooza, she hates me, and darned if I know why. I love that. I think dogs might write pretty good poetry, give us a good view. Sometimes a poet gets a start for a poem from another poem. I took a line from a poem by Jim Selar, and I wrote this poem called Passport, Visa, Cup of Tea, and Nancy put it in whole notes. One day you may stop going back and forth on the streets of this town. An Irish village calls and calls. Without passport, credit cards, or visa, you may go. She will bend to a peat fire, lift a blue pot, pour steaming cups. One tall red horse will rear and trample tender ivy, twining her mantle. You will walk to the shore, where Irish rocks are braving waves that run all the way to the streets where you thought about leaving. I was with my grandmother Rose a lot when I was young, and grandmother died when I was still a very young child, so that was probably the first big sorrow in my life. I missed her a lot, and this is a poem I wrote called Looking for Grandma. It's been a long time since I could lift the latch on the slatted wooden gate and look for Grandma. Calling Grandma, I would go down the gravel path to the chicken pen, where the big white Brahma hens with feathers on their feet would be pacing like ladies of the court. It was fun to watch Grandma mix red and green medicine with their drinking water and clip their broad wings to keep them flying low. Sometimes I'd find Grandma in the garden digging potatoes from the warm, sandy earth, and we would fill the blue granite pan. On the way to the house, we might find a four-leaf clover and stop by the pansy bed to see their little faces. Grandma could make a fearsome snapdragon open its mouth and smile. In the winter, I would listen to the hum of her sewing machine. With clothespins, I could hang up the bright neckties that my father had once worn. I loved to uncurl the soft rings of noodles that Grandma cut on a flowery board. My favorite place to stand was her south window, standing there among her fragrant houseplants. Now I lift the latch of memory, still looking. This is a poem that I wrote about my Rose granddad. I should tell you, I wasn't going to do this, but I believe I will anyway. My granddad, he was a Nebraska pioneer, lived on the homestead for 40 years, and he built a house in town and moved into town. And he was on the school boards in the country all the time. When he moved to town, he was on the school board, he was on the town board, he was justice of the peace for years and years and years. You know, it was kind of thrilling to walk by his house and think, gee, right inside in that kitchen, they had that fist fight over that lawsuit the other day. And then also it was thrilling to think my grandfather could marry people. That was really thrilling. But of course now they've done away with justice of the peace. They don't have that anymore. But it was thrilling when I was a little girl to know that my grandfather was a justice of the peace. Well, this is a poem I wrote for him, and it's a sonnet. I like sonnets. That's one of my favorite forms. I love to write sonnets. So here's this one, and it's an old one. If he could see me writing this with tears, he'd be amused, and he might shake his head, that head of 90 strong, productive years. He'd ask me if I thought that I'd be read. I know he did not think it foolishness to dream and write a poem now and then, a small thing one might do at school recess, returning soon to reading other men. But if he saw me calling back old scenes, he'd know what all those years I never told, how much he meant to me. How much he means, though he has long been dead and I've grown old. I wish that I had toppled every doubt and written this before his school was out. That I use a lot of my poetry to tell about my experiences with my family. I have heard that if you use the word grandfather or grandmother in your poetry, you're a dead dog. But because it's just out of style, I suppose. But I'm afraid I still have written a lot of things about many members of my family, including my grandparents, because they will not be forgotten. Really, through the years of my teaching, my time was taken. I had to study for another degree or study for another class or teach. My time was just not there until I retired. I didn't have time to write as much and read as much as I wanted to. I love to read everything too, of course. So along with writing, I must say that I love reading too. I think that's the key to writing, is a lot of good reading. My writing is now mainly poetry. I've also write music, and when I taught music too, and have written a lot of music that's been used in my schools. But now I'm writing poetry. I have often asked myself why I write poetry. In one of the poems, I say, maybe there is no really good reason. And you know, Judson Jerome said if you want to write, you should just go away and read a lot and you'd soon get over it. And so maybe that's what I should do. I call this poem Unfinished Poem. I hoed the rose beds today. By the way, can you hear me all right? I hoed the rose beds today and scared out a baby rabbit that ran across the sidewalk and hid under chrysanthemums. Even though it's July, there's a wind today that reminds me of winter with the air full of snow. That baby rabbit seems special, all 6 inches of brown fur. The mother probably ate my early peas this spring to nurture her grassy nestful. I don't know why I write. Maybe there's no good reason. Judson Jerome advised, if you want to write, you should go away somewhere where you can read all the time and you'd soon be free of it. I want to try that again as soon as I finish this poem. The baby rabbit came back when I stopped to rest. Its tiny nose kept wrinkling over a clover blossom. Would it be child labor when a baby rabbit keeps running through a poem? That wind today does remind me of winter, although it is July. I hope the rabbit will live to make tracks in the snow. I could write about its first winter, but I should try Jerome's cure. I surely will when I finish this poem. This poem is full of cliches. It's called One Horse Cliche. I am the co-pilot who flies low, trucking carrots and lettuce from the coast. We keep our cool inside and bring 'em back alive all the way to Nebraska. Tonight I'm tired like our 18-wheeler. The neon pie in the sky at Bosselman's stop will be as welcome as another gear on Wolf Creek Pass. This is a poem about the prairie in Nebraska land too, and I'm going to have quite a few old-fashioned poems, I'm afraid, so if any of you feel like leaving, why, go ahead. This one is called Heritage. Today this rolling prairie land is spread beneath a sky whose blue seems too unreal until the fragrances of trees in bloom and rainbow flowers in the native grass convince us. Clouds have landed by the fence where plums are wearing bridal white for bees. Now we can see what our forefathers saw within this land and why they stayed to plow. The prairie wind that bends the grass today is not so gentle every day. In storms it takes the crops. The hungry insect hordes are killers too. The snows in wintertime bring isolation when the drifts pile high. Thank God we are the children of such folk as broke the prairie sods with plow and sweat. They planted corn with faith and trees with hope, and we are breathing through their great lungs yet. This is another one about the land. I just couldn't resist putting this in. It's called Come. There is a spot of woodland on our farm, a full 4 acres where homesteaders' plow has never delved. The trees once planted there through years of summer drought and blizzard cold have persevered and grown in their own ways until today they are a shady glade, conspicuous where other acres bow to irrigation's tempting, harsh demands. There live the wild rose and the wild vine grape. There grow the settlers' cherries, sand and choke. Asparagus is green in spring, and autumn brings the red gold fragrant clusters of wild plum. I wonder that I do not build a room or two where I could live within those woods. I wonder if the squirrels would object to some commotion there. Could I survive and make my peace with snakes and spittlebugs? In dreams I hear the meadowlarks and know their songs from my own fences are the best of melodies. The land is beckoning. we'll change the scenery a little bit. This goes to a rainy day now. And I see artists here, so this poem is sort of about artists too. Rainy day poem. On some rainy day, I might ask artists to take me to visit a friend of hers and see the old house where she lives. I'd like to climb the creaky stairs to a chair in the attic. I would hear rain on the roof and perhaps find a stack of National Geographics. I might find Nathaniel Hawthorne's Mosses from an Old Manse and recall that his happy bride, Sophia, had cut their names in one window pane with her diamond. There might be Mark Twain's Blue Jay yarns, and I could hear walnuts drop far down into the empty granary where old Jay thought he was just filling up a small hole in the roof. There might be Washington Irving's sketchbook and maybe Dickens' Pickwick Papers. All too soon, Artis and her friend would call me to come downstairs for a cup of hot tea. Then Artis and I would drive away in the rain, windshield wipers swishing. And one more rainy poem. This is one about driving on US 20 when, remember, what spring was it when everything flooded? You know, up there, everything was flooded. The Elkhorn and all of them were just, the roads were out. It was, was that just last spring?
40.
Well, long.
It happened in 90 and 93.
Yeah, but we had them in the 50s, too.
Well, that's where we are, folks. Here it is. It's called The Rainy Way to Plainview. The drive, we drive up over the big hill south of Page and see the Piccadilly entirely water. Bill Wilson's bull pasture holds bullheads now. The Elkhorn River is too wet to drain its meadows. Across the road to Ewing, big black letters say, closed. Hay rakes at Orchard wait on high ground. Should we skip the Ashfall Dig and the Royal Zoo? Still raining on US 20 all the way to Plainview. It's always hard to move away from a place that you have called home. You live a lot of places, but you don't call all of them home, of course. But if you happen to call one home and then have to move away, it's not a very easy thing. And I have a poem here called Home. The house will be empty now, in the sun and the dappled shade of summer. In tears I've cleared the linen shelves, and then still wept above the lingering sachet in dresser drawers. Movers have come with workday noise and leveled all the years to boxes snugged within a van. Now as I leave, I hear the lilacs shrieking in the yard, and all the memories are standing at the windows, waving from the doors.
That's very good.
Thank you very much for listening. This poem is, now Barbara, don't be crying on me here. You know what it means, don't we? This poem is also about moving. It's called A Long Time Washing, and Nancy put in whole notes too. And here it is. I'll never see the summer evening sun without remembering the way it looks tonight, along my row of hollyhocks that stand at pink attention. In the morning, we'll be gone. These rooms have been assaulted and stripped of their furnishings. I ache for the empty walls, bare floors. The memories all sit around in chairs that are not here. Somehow, the tree that stands outside our window seems a friend too dear to leave. I clear away our evening meal and take a long time washing coffee cups. No, I don't think there's any money in poetry, but there's no poetry in money either. I like to read a lot of things other than poetry. Of course, I like the ordinary classic authors. I like Robert Frost, naturally, but I like to read Wendell Berry too. He not only poetry, but fiction, but his fiction and nonfiction both. I enjoy that. Of a younger writer. I like to read Jane Kenyon. I know she died this last year, and that was too bad. She writes very, very nice poetry. Then, of course, we have our 3Ks right here in Lincoln that we can always read about. Kuzer, Clefcorn, and Kuzma. I think I should put maybe these poems that I brought tonight, or maybe a lot of others, into a book or two. I really should. Clefcorn has told me, he says, why don't you put your poems in a book? Now, I know I should. It's just a great deal of laziness on my part that I have not done this. Not that they would sell, that's beside the point. No one buys poetry. But still, in spite of the fact that no one buys poetry, I believe there are a lot of us who enjoy it. We enjoy writing it, and we enjoy reading it. If you're interested in writing poetry, I think one of the best things you can do is read. Just read a lot of everything, not only poetry, but read a great deal of not only old things, but new as well. And then there's nothing that helps one like being with some other people who like to write poetry and sharing your poems together. That's a great help too. Chaparral Poets is the Lincoln Chaparral Poets, and we also have Nebraska Chaparral Poets, and they're both fine organizations. I belong to both of them. The Lincoln Chaparral Poets is a fine group of people who would love to meet more people who like to write poetry. And it's such great fun, and it's good for one, too, to share things. It's a chance to read what you've written and get ideas and help from other people. And I just feel if there's anyone who's interested at all in doing a little writing of poetry, that they should contact us. We're Lincoln Chaparral Poets. We have to have a little business meeting, of course, but mainly we read our poems and talk about poetry. And then we usually have a poet or writer or editor or publisher come and talk to us about publishing. We do one thing that maybe some groups do not do, and that is we have a monthly publication which we call Poetry Pages. And in this publication, we can see our own unpublished poems published, and then we can read them over and enjoy them. And we do this at every meeting. Well, congratulations for standing with me this far. We'll see what happens now. Oh, this is one Barbara will like, I'm sure. You know, Marilyn Dorff rescued this poem. I wasn't going to do anything with it. She rescued it, so we sent it to Chaparral, and it's called Growing Up in Brunswick. The bean rows in Brunswick ran all the way to Walden Pond. Under long green fronds of mother's pedestal fern, I walked in a tropical forest, watching warily for snakes, while the vine-covered trees pulsed with the songs of orange and yellow birds. Sometimes a porch railing sailed off with me to the ivory isles of Greece. Coming back, we zoomed over the fallen Forum columns in Rome. In winter, the sweet frozen sap from broken maple branches carried me to the Vermont woods, sugaring. Marilyn also told me I'd better read this poem, so I will. It's called Red Ribbon. It is early morning in the garden. Dawn is only a circle of opalescent sky in the bird bath. White daisies awake in their beds, but red roses still dream in the dark. Suddenly, cardinal song curls through the air like red ribbon. I never lived on a farm, so this poem is sort of about a farm. It's called The Outsider. I step inside the doorway of Uncle Ernest's tall red barn. Hens in the walkway cackle and scatter. I smell fresh manure and feel the animal warmth. Snorts and stomps roll from a horse stall near the door. 3 penned-up calves are bawling for their mothers. Up the loft ladder I go to look into the haymow. A ray of sun shows the dust in August hay. Is it empty up here? No, pigeons are cooing, and I see a curl of kittens so young their eyes are not yet open. Mother cat won't want me here. Standing outside, I wonder what it would be like to live here. This is a poem about somebody who liked to dress Western and even live Western, and it's called Travels with Tex. He strides through life in Western clothes, his hat so broad he won't take the elevator. He twirls his rope above a pinball machine and catches you a prize. Down on his luck, he'll treat you to a Spanish smoke. With him there is no interstate, no farms at night full of electric bloom. With him, you ride from ranch to ranch and cool your spurs in a honky-tonk town. At the end of the trail, you know there'll be a Holiday Inn with plenty of oats. You ever attended a farm sale?
Oh, bad one.
They're not very good, are they? This is called Farm Sale. After all the cars have gone, I drive back into the farmyard, where house and barn doors stand open. I see Mom's yellow rose bush by the shed and hope the new owner will let it grow. Inside the house, I walk through a bare kitchen to the walls and windows of a dead living room. The open stairway beckons, but there's too much silence falling from the emptiness above. I wonder if Humpty Dumpty had a great fall or a great sale. I close a few doors and ask my car to take me to another world. This poem is called Wildflowers. You carried them home in your hand. I pictured you bending to pick them in the fence row. Purple coneflower, gold puccoon, blue of trail bells, and a wild rose. A little wilted, but so full of grace, they filled grandmother's sugar bowl and overflowed the room. I have to get a little more Swedish in this, so this one is called Swedish Morning. Wake in the morning with coral golden sun, and all the birch trees stand in white clumps, sipping breakfast coffee. From the Minnesota lake, with its pebbled shore, willowy reeds whisper like gossips in Sweden. In this poem, I'm writing to the creative part of myself and asking it if it's dead yet, or wondering if it's been killed by all those things, you know, like grammar rules and regulations and things that you have to learn along the way. So here it is, Love Letter. Dear old tenderness, or shall I call you design mind? When are you going to step forth and lead me on the shining, happy path of writing things that I am really thinking about? When? Have you been frightened out of your dear, true self by all the years of language rules that I have memorized? Have you? I can only hope that you haven't given up on me. Let's talk this over. Love, Irene. I've got 3 haikus. Haiku is a Japanese form, you know, of the counted syllables and so on, which we have all. They're not really Japanese, but anyway, here are 3 haikus I have attempted. The first one is called Jewel Morning. Zillions of diamonds, breakfast of earth for the sun, each grass blade 1 sip. And here's one called Spring Song. Willow chimes yellow, gold forsythia rings bells, winter melts away. This last one is, if you know something about possums, you know how the little babies cling to the back of the mother of the possums? I suppose you do. So it's called Playing Possum. Parked on steep hill drive, all the baby possum cars cling to Mother Road. This poem, is this my last one? How am I doing? I don't know. How am I doing, Vicki? All right? Okay, then I'll read, my chaparral friends will be very angry because they've heard this and they don't particularly like it. So I will read Alchemy. Alchemy. I watched long rays of evening sun spread amber in the slants of winter grass. Thin gold outlines bare branches on the lilacs. Horizon trees are onyx silhouettes far in the coral west. Along the schoolhouse eaves, a copper gleam darkens to tarnished brass. Like silver mercury, night flows up to my window. This is a poem called Stargazing. From the depths of the blue-black sky, the distances press down upon my breast, till I am smaller than a worm on the earth, not even one short breath in this universe. I look up high into the depths and find all the stars of the Dipper just as they were when Dad pointed in my childhood sky. But tonight I am whirling fast, dizzy in the whirling dark, turning with all of Earth's worms, with the Empire State Building, Golden Gate Bridge, and the Great Wall of China, whirling beneath the stars. If you look up long enough, you can get nicely dizzy, can't you? This poem is called All That Gold. It's about a winter morning. I'll remember this winter darkness pregnant with dawn. Wraithy moon rides low in the west and knows its time is short. Behold the sun, spilling all that gold over the snow. This poem is a good Nebraska poem out in the cornfield just before harvest. I see you duck under barbed wire and walk away into the tall, tan stalks of October corn. Rustling corn leaves close behind you. I stand alone outside the fence where frost has already lullabied the wild roses. But you are coming with your arms full of loose, dry husks, revealing big ears of corn so gold that only your hair falling across your blue jacket, only your hair is more golden. This is Art in High Places, and it's really not worth very much, but here goes. On a sheet of notebook paper, Lisa has carefully drawn a tallish rectangular shape of many colored blocks. It is a tall house, and the blocks are rooms, she has explained. Along the bottom, I see pretty lollipops on sticks, I said. No, they are flowers in the front yard, Lisa corrected, and went on to tell me that the brown thing shooting off from the house was Dougie piloting a rocket. How can two ladybug magnets hold all of that up on the refrigerator door? My cat has topaz eyes, the silver fur of her astir with purr. She sat with gaze so wise, Egyptian sprite in gray twilight last night. But that is not her guise when morning comes. Humble, she bums some crumbs. And I never thought I'd ever get this old And since I am, I'm really happy that I can still write and read and enjoy things, and I really do thank you very much for asking me to come and that you will talk to me about poetry. Words are very important. I think sometimes we don't realize what an effect our words do have. I have one poem that I'll read tonight called Marking the Tree, that's about thinking of the effect that your words may have on people. And you know, it might have very lasting effects. I think our words are pretty important things. As it says in the Bible, the tongue is a very sharp weapon, and we don't realize how we be careful when we use it. Sometimes we think that our words are like weapons. Words can be very hurting, and they can be very healing as well. But they're so potent, is my message in this poem. Words are very potent little things. And this poem is called Marking the Tree. I envision you reading the new rawhide of my words. I sent them to bruise your mind and stay there, like the livid mark of a leather thong whacked across the tender bark of a young tamarack. A mark like that will stick tight as your skin, and you will remember me. This poem is about growing old, and it's called Falling Asleep. So if any of you would like to fall asleep, go ahead. Might be like a lullaby to put you to sleep. And it's a sonnet, too. I love to write sonnets. Within the wedding whiteness of wild plum, the bees are humming nectar's bridal song that tells me April's tenderness has come, once more to let me know I still belong. I see the gold of daffodils and try to synchronize the surging urge to grow. I dare not scorn God's gold by asking why I'm put to shame by seeds I did not sow. If I knew how the dooryard lilacs keep their roots alive in winter's bitter cold, could I then fall more thankfully asleep while I am growing slow and growing old? I plead the newborn babe's unfocused stare upon a world he did not ask to share. I guess I'll have to close with a word of advice that isn't any good at all either. Thank you all for coming and listening, and thanks to the library for asking me, and drive safely as you go home. And here's my advice poem. Well, it's not really advice, but it's called How to Be Sure. Young means young, and old means old. Everybody knows that. But you don't know that old was once young, and young will be old until you are. Marilyn found a good thing in her calendar, and Vicki said I must read it, and I did forget. On the 21st of March, which is today, isn't that wonderful? The calendar would be that way, and it says, "The world is never the same once a good poem has been added to it." And who wrote it? Dylan Thomas. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
Really wonderful. Thank you.